So cope is when you're telling yourself a positive story to deal with a negative reality. In a lot of online spaces, if you say pretty much anything positive, someone will say you're coping. There's also a bunch of other spin-off meanings, but I'm not talking about those right now. So behind cope is the idea that there's a concrete reality, and your life in that reality is basically bad. And if you want to be happy, either you have to change the circumstances of your life, or you just can't do anything, and you should just accept reality and be blackpilled. So I absorbed this view like everyone else in weird online spaces, and I didn't think much of it. And then a year or so ago, I got promoted at work, and I started having to talk to business leaders from small to medium-sized companies and do a bit of consulting and sales stuff. After a few months around these sorts of people, I realized something that really shocked me. Business leaders are the biggest copers I've ever met. Pretty much all the C-suite types, and that's CEO, CTO, etc., live their lives in a complete fantasy land. And this is weird, right? We expect coping to be a low status behavior, but these are pretty successful people. I'm not speaking to Warren Buffett through my work, but they're locally successful people running businesses and have enough money to pay for consultancy, so they're not losers. These people basically don't allow any of their own mistakes or shortcomings to enter into their view of the world at all. In their view, they're great and their company is great. And no matter what happens, their view always swings back to that, kind of like an elastic band. If their company collapses down to half the size, profits drop, and they get voted out or something like that, they feel bad for about a day, maybe a week. But then they narrativize whatever happened as a new dawn and a chance to reinvent myself or something like that. You might have heard of that kind of thing in press releases from business leaders and assumed it's kind of saccharine nonsense and they don't really believe it. But I promise you they do. They have an invincibly positive view of everything, the whole world and their place in it. Now, I'm not talking about being annoyingly upbeat. That's different. That's a different kind of person. What I'm talking about isn't something you'll notice immediately. You see it over time in how they frame things as things come up. Now, I think if one of these business leaders swapped places with the most pitiable basement-dwelling incel you can imagine, they just wouldn't view their situation the same as the incel would. Whereas an incel feels bad about not getting laid and looks at all the negative aspects of their life, a business leader type would never think of themselves that way. I think if you asked a business leader who was in exactly the same situation as an incel, they would say something like, right now I'm living in kind of a simple, minimalistic, and fairly isolated lifestyle, so I can just get in touch with my real values and channel my energies towards, new things. And of course, a lot of people would see the reality of them and they would laugh at the cope and call them a coper. But whenever that happened, I think it just wouldn't affect them that much. I think they'd just keep socializing and they'd look for people who do believe their narrative about themselves and people who can help them improve their lives. If you haven't met many business leaders, you might be thinking that I'm just describing the annoying entrepreneur type with an insufferable Instagram who constantly talks themselves up and generally acts like a bit of a clown on social media. I think those guys are a perfect illustration of what happens if you try to be the kind of person I'm describing and fail. The entrepreneur bro doesn't quite believe his own nonsense, and so he turns it up to 11 out of insecurity. The result is that he comes off as kind of gaudy and desperate, and it's obvious he's following a template rather than kind of being more honestly self-expressive. The kind of business leader I've been talking to has similar goals as the entrepreneur bro, and maybe their methods are similar, but the result with real business leaders is seamless in a way that you don't get with the entrepreneur bro. You can tell they really have completely drunk their own Kool-Aid. If any part of them ever doubted their own narrative and positive spin on things, that part is long gone. So they don't feel the need to act with any exaggeration. So how come all these business leaders are copers and non-copers don't tend to become business leaders? I think that's because to start a business, You need to shotgun a whole bunch of opportunities and deal with failing most of the time. I think only copers can go through that and keep rolling the dice in the market. In contrast, I think we in weird online spaces do exactly the opposite. We spin the positive as negative. We condition ourselves to be more negative about ourselves and the world.